The late August heat clung to the town of Melridge like a wet, suffocating shroud. At 60 years old, Walter Brannigan was still the kind of man who refused to let a little sweat or a buzzing problem slow him down. His two-story farmhouse had stood strong for over 100 years, but now it hosted something that made his skin crawl: hornets. Loud ones. Angry ones. Nesting somewhere up in the attic, beyond the cracked wood and stale insulation. For weeks, he'd heard the droning hum behind the bedroom walls, a low and constant warning that seemed to grow louder by the day. Karen, his wife of 34 years, had begged him to call pest control. "Please, Walt," she'd said just last night as they sat on the porch sipping iced tea, "let someone else deal with it." "I was in the fire department 15 years, he said, swatting at a hornet that buzzed past his ear. "This is nothing." Karen shook her head and muttered something under her breath about pride getting men killed. Now, standing at the foot of the attic ladder, Walter felt his knees protest as he stepped onto the bottom rung. He wore a long-sleeved flannel shirt tucked into thick jeans, boots, gloves, and a makeshift mesh veil from the local hardware store. He looked ridiculous, but he didn't care. The can of industrial-grade insecticide trembled slightly in his right hand. The attic hatch creaked open above him. A wave of heat rushed down, mixing with the sharp sting of fiberglass insulation and the faint but undeniable buzz of hornets. "Walter, you be careful up there," Karen called from below, voice strained. He didn't answer. He hated being doubted. With effort, he climbed the narrow wooden ladder and hauled himself into the attic. It smelled like dry wood, rat droppings, and thyme. His flashlight flickered to life, casting its narrow beam through the low ceiling space. He swept it across dusty boxes, old insulation, forgotten Christmas ornaments, and then froze. There it was. The hornet's nest loomed in the far corner, nestled against the vent like a tumor. It was massive, at least the size of a basketball, built in thick, papery layers. A slow traffic of yellow and black insects zipped in and out of it with mechanical precision. Walter's chest tightened at the sight. He crouched low, slow and deliberate, like he was back in the army stalking through jungle brush. The buzz filled the air around him now, louder than ever, vibrating in his teeth and fingertips. He raised the spray can, aimed, and pressed down. The chemical stream hissed violently, striking the nest dead on. For a second, it seemed to work. A few hornets dropped twitching to the floor. Then the hive went berserk. A sudden roar of buzzing filled the space as dozens, no hundreds, of hornets poured out in a frenzy, crawling over the surface of the nest and launching into the air. Walter didn't even have time to curse. The first sting landed on the side of his neck, sharp and blinding. Then another jabbed into his wrist, and then his cheek, right through the mesh. He recoiled, dropping the flashlight. It bounced once, then rolled into a shadowy corner, its light spinning wildly. He panicked. He waved his arms, tried to backpedal, but the attic was too low, too narrow. He felt a hornet crawl up the inside of his sleeve and screamed as it stung the tender skin of his bicep. Another slipped under his veil. He thrashed, ripping the mesh away from his face. That was a mistake. 3 more stings landed on his forehead, each one a hammer of fire. He stumbled toward the opening, but the attic floor shifted under his boots. One foot caught a loose board. He flailed, then fell. Walter crashed down through the attic hatch, bouncing off the ladder and landing hard on the hallway floor below with a sickening thud. The world tilted. His mouth filled with dust. A single hornet was still clinging to his collar, its wings whirring inches from his ear. From the kitchen, Karen heard the impact. She dropped the knife she'd been using and ran. "Walter! Walter!" But there was no answer. Karen's bare feet slapped against the wooden hallway floor as she sprinted toward the attic entrance. The ladder was askew, one side bent at an angle, and Walter lay crumpled beneath it like a rag doll, his right leg twisted unnaturally beneath him. The mesh veil lay half pulled off his face, revealing skin that was already blotching and swelling. His eyes were closed. His mouth was slightly open. "Oh my God, Walter!" She dropped to her knees beside him and hovered her hands over his chest, terrified to touch him, but more terrified not to. His breathing was fast, too fast and shallow. Angry red welts marked his neck, cheeks, and arms. A few hornets still buzzed in the air, searching for new targets. Karen swatted them away with a trembling hand. "Can you hear me? Walter, say something." He groaned, then winced. "Stupid," he mumbled, barely audible. "Shoulda waited." "Don't speak," she said, heart hammering. "I'm calling 911." She darted to the phone in the kitchen, nearly knocking over the landline on the wall. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons, and when the dispatcher answered, her voice cracked. "My husband. He's been stung dozens of times. He fell from the attic. Please send someone, quickly." Within minutes, the wail of sirens cut through the quiet of Melridge. A fire truck, an ambulance, and a sheriff's cruiser pulled into their gravel driveway. The paramedics rushed inside, lifting Walter onto a backboard and strapping an oxygen mask to his face. One of them, a tall red-headed woman with sleeves rolled to the elbow, called out vitals as they went. "Pulse erratic. Shallow breathing. Looks like anaphylaxis. Possible concussion. We're starting epinephrine now." Karen could only nod, numbly holding onto the door frame as the stretcher rolled past her. She followed them outside, her robe clinging to her damp skin. Walter's eyes fluttered open for a moment as they lifted him into the ambulance. "Don't die on me," she whispered, grabbing his hand before the doors closed. "You stubborn, stubborn man." They sped off toward the county hospital, leaving Karen in the yard, hands shaking, eyes burning. The hornets, still active, buzzed quietly from the attic vent above. The pest control guy arrived the next morning in a white van that had "Rapid Response Exterminators" plastered across the side in peeling red letters. His name was Cal, a wiry man in his 40s with a thick mustache and the confident gait of someone who'd faced more than his share of infestations. Karen met him at the door, still wearing the same cardigan from the night before, her face drawn and pale from a sleepless night. "Third step's loose," she warned as he mounted the porch. "Appreciate the heads up," Cal said, offering a curt nod. She led him upstairs, pointing toward the hallway ceiling where the attic hatch still hung ajar. A single hornet crawled along the trim. Cal squashed it without flinching. "Big bastards," he muttered. "You have no idea," Karen said. Cal suited up in a full protective suit, resembled something out of a sci-fi movie, and hoisted himself into the attic with a camera attached to his helmet. Karen stayed back, arms crossed, listening to the soft creak of floorboards above. "Jesus," he muttered after a few seconds. "This thing's huge. How bad? I've seen nests the size of basketballs. This one's like a beach ball. And it's spread out, sectioned, like they've colonized different areas. Very aggressive species, too. Looks like European hornets. Bigger than most." He sprayed, swept, and vacuumed for nearly an hour. Karen paced downstairs, flinching every time he thudded or cursed. When he finally emerged, pulling off his hood and wiping sweat from his brow, his expression was grim. "You're lucky your husband made it out," Cal said. "They'd been there a while. Some of these stings, man, they hit like darts." "I know," Karen said softly. "I cleared the main nest, but you'll want me back in a few days to check the wall cavities." These things dig deep. One queen survives, and you've got a whole new colony in a month." Karen nodded, handed him the check, and walked him out. She didn't go back upstairs that day. Or the next. At the hospital, Walter was recovering slowly. His face had deflated from its grotesque swelling, but his leg was fractured, and the pain meds left him foggy and irritable. On the third night, he stared at the ceiling, trying to ignore the ache in his chest, not from the fall, but from the thing Karen hadn't said since the ambulance ride, how close he'd come. A nurse came in to check his vitals. "Looks like you're lucky," she said, adjusting his 52 stings, they said. "Any allergies?" "No," Walter muttered. "Guess I'm tough." "You're lucky," she repeated. "Few more and you'd be toast." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. The nurse patted his shoulder and left him in the dim light of the TV above the bed. An old war documentary played on mute, but something buzzed beneath it. He turned toward the window. Nothing. Still, the sound lingered. That night, he dreamed of the attic, of crawling hornets slipping into his mouth, of the nest pulsing like a heart, of Karen crying at the foot of the ladder, her voice drowned by the swarm. Back home, Karen heard it too, the faintest hum behind the drywall, not constant but steady, like an engine idling beneath her thoughts. She told herself it was phantom noise, that the trauma of nearly losing Walter had made her paranoid. But the air upstairs felt heavy, unnatural. The hallway never used to be so cold at night. And her dreams, always the same, Walter screaming from the attic, unable to climb down, hornets flooding down like a black waterfall. On the fourth night after Cal's visit, she finally forced herself to climb back up there, just to check. She wore gloves, a scarf. She carried a flashlight and a can of spray just in case. The attic was quiet at first. Then she heard it. Not buzzing. Not exactly. A rustle. Then a tapping. From inside the wall. At Melridge General Hospital, Walter lay motionless in a sterile white room under harsh fluorescent lights. His face was swollen and pocked with welts, and 4 dripped medication into his arm. His right leg was encased in a temporary splint. Monitors beeped steadily beside the bed. Karen sat at his bedside, her purse abandoned on the floor. She hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken. The nurse had said the EpiPen had likely saved his life. He was lucky, they said. A few minutes later, and it might have been too late. He woke slowly. The swelling made it hard to move his lips, but he managed to turn his head slightly toward her. "You didn't listen," Karen said flatly. "I told you to wait. I told you to call someone." "I thought I could handle it," he rasped, his voice paper-thin. "Yeah. Handle the fall too." Her voice cracked. He tried a chuckle but winced. "Did I get 'em?" Karen's jaw tightened. "They're still up there, buzzing away like they own the place. Damn freeloaders." She exhaled, the edge of a smile tugging at her lips despite everything. Then the fear returned. "You could have died, Walt. I know. I don't want to bury you because of a hornet's nest. Don't do that to me." Walter's eyes closed, either from exhaustion or guilt, or both. Outside, dusk was falling. Shadows crept across the hospital's beige walls. Karen stood up, kissed his swollen forehead, and whispered, "Sleep. But when you're better, we're hiring a damn professional." He didn't argue. Back at the house that night, Karen lay alone in their bed, listening. The buzzing had grown louder. Or maybe it was just her imagination. Karen held her breath as the rustling continued. It wasn't constant, just soft, deliberate movements, taps, like fingernails dragging over wood. Then silence. Then another shift. She aimed the flashlight at the attic wall. Cal said they might have gone into the cavities, she whispered to herself, her voice thin in the stale air. Could be stragglers. Just insects. But her gut told her something was wrong. The sound wasn't random. It stopped when she stopped. Moved when she moved. Like something, or someone, was listening. Waiting. She turned back toward the attic hatch, then froze. A faint buzz erupted again. Not loud like before, more like a vibration in the air, coming from the opposite side of the attic. Behind an old armoire leaning crooked in the corner. Karen swallowed and inched closer. She should have gone back down. Should have waited for Cal. But something compelled her forward. Curiosity, maybe. Or the fear of letting the unknown stay unknown. She gripped the handle of the armoire and pulled. Dust spiraled. A faint musty breeze brushed her face. Behind it, the wall had been tampered with. A small square of paneling was missing. Just gone. She knelt, squinting into the hollow. Her flashlight beam caught something inside, papery folds like burnt parchment and dark shapes wriggling within them. Another nest. No, nests. Connected. Living. Then she heard the whisper. Not buzzing. A voice. Right in her ear. You left him. Karen screamed and fell backward, the flashlight clattering across the floor and going dark. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Her heart thundered in her chest. She scrambled toward the hatch, not daring to look back, and descended the ladder so fast she twisted her ankle when she hit the ground. She slammed the attic door shut and locked it with trembling fingers. Her face was pale as bone. She didn't sleep that night. Walter was discharged 3 days later. His leg was still in a brace, and he moved slowly, but the hospital couldn't justify keeping him longer. Karen brought him home in the late afternoon. They didn't talk much during the drive. He could tell something was off. The house felt colder, dimmer. Karen barely looked at the attic. She avoided it like it had grown teeth. Walter noticed. "You all right?" he asked as she reheated some soup in the kitchen. She nodded without answering, but when she placed the bowl in front of him, her hands were shaking. "What happened while I was gone?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. Karen hesitated. "I went up, just to check. And they're still there," she said, barely above a whisper. "Not just hornets." Walter frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" "I don't know. I don't know. But something's in the walls. Something that watches." Walter didn't laugh. He remembered the dream. The voices. The sensation of something crawling not on, but inside him, beneath his skin. He stared up at the ceiling. Then he made a decision. 2 days later, they sold the house. The realtor never asked why they left in such a rush. Karen didn't offer. Walter signed the papers without looking at them twice. They moved into a modest one-floor rental on the edge of town. No attics. No hollow walls. They didn't bring any of the old attic storage with them. Cal never returned their calls. A month later, the new owners, a young couple from out of state, moved into the old Brannigan house. They repainted the kitchen, replaced the rotting floorboards, fixed the garden fence. But when they asked the contractor to install new insulation in the attic, he refused to go back up after the first inspection. Said he felt something in there. Said the walls moved. They thought he was drunk, until the wife started hearing buzzing behind the bedroom walls. Late at night. Buzzing. And something else. A voice. Whispering things that no insect should know.